Let me just preface this by saying something. So I don't want you guys to think that I'm just hating on AMD for no reason. I actually love AMD. I have an AMD CPU in my everyday build right now, and there's literally no reason to go Intel. They're killing it over Intel in the CPU space. PCI Gen 4 support, the backwards and forwards compatibility of the AM4 motherboard, and that's all I'm going to say for now. Just AMD's killing it as far as CPUs go, but as far as graphics cards go, not so much. And I'm going to tell you why, as for what I thought about the Ryzen 6000 launch. And whatever negative stuff I have to say, it's mostly not their fault. Because they couldn't have seen what Nvidia had up their sleeve coming. They probably thought, like a lot of us did, that Ampere was going to be a disaster, and that again, just like Turing 20 series, they were going to give us a little more performance for a lot more money, or something like that. But Nvidia just knocked it out of the park, and there was no way AMD could have seen that coming. But since Nvidia offers such good price to performance, since AMD couldn't have seen that coming, they probably spent too much money on R&D to be able to remain competitive in the way they normally do, where their GPUs are actually cheaper than Nvidia's at more or less the same performance level. And I'm going to talk about that because it's not so straightforward as far as the prices go. But it's safe to say that AMD was not able to undercut Nvidia across the entire GPU lineup. The product I found most disappointing across the AMD 6000 Radeon lineup was the 6800. And the reason for that is that it's a product that butts heads with the 3070, more or less, but it's $80 more, which is really hard to justify. I know they do include double the VRAM actually. AMD has 16 gigabytes of VRAM across the lineup, but those extra 8 gigabytes are not really enough to justify it when it's not something that is really gonna have an impact on the performance for a gamer, as we can see based on the metrics AMD provided us with. But the main reason I'm disappointed with regards to the prices is that AMD has kind of always been the budget guy, both in the CPUs and in the GPU marketplaces. Maybe not always, but at least for a long time now. So that has kind of become a change, especially in the CPU area with Ryzen. I think that AMD deserves to now charge prices that are higher than Intel's because they're offering more value. But in the graphics card space, I would not say that that is the case exactly. So based on the metrics that AMD provided us with, it seems that the 6800 just narrowly outperforms the 2080 Ti, which is narrowly outperformed by the 3070. But here's the thing, and it says it right there. This is with smart access memory enabled. And you might think, oh, well, I have an AMD CPU or I'm gonna get one, and it doesn't matter because I'll just enable smart access memory and I'll have that anyways. But here's the thing. It hasn't been entirely clarified yet, but it's definitely suspected that smart access memory will only be available to 5000 series Ryzen, and probably also, as Dr. Lisa Su implied in the announcement, it will only be available for people with 500 series motherboards. Since smart access memory provides quite a notable performance jump, without it, the 6800 would probably lag just behind the 3070, which makes it really hard to justify paying $80 more for it, even if it has double the VRAM, because clearly the VRAM is not in this case actually helping the gaming performance much. Now, I definitely don't want to criticize AMD too much. I seriously think they deserve some slack, and the reason is they seriously delivered with Ryzen 5000 series. And as far as Radeon 6000 goes, they still deserve some slack, I think, because they clearly had to make up for R&D costs that they spent on matching Nvidia's RTX lineup. Previous generation, of course, they weren't able to match Nvidia's top-of-the-line RTX cards, and now they're doing that, so props for that. But that being said, I cannot, in good conscience, recommend the 6800 at all based on its price. But as far as the 6800 XT, now this item is priced much more competitively at $50 less than the 3080 it butts heads with. So at $50 less, the 6800 XT outperforms the 3080 a little bit, but this is with Rage mode and the smart access memory already enabled. In this case with both of those. And that's already an overclock. So if you compare this to an overclocked 3080, they would probably be about even, or the 6800 XT would be a little bit behind. So the metrics that AMD provided may be a little bit misleading because of this. And in this case, again, the 6800 XT has 16 gigabytes of VRAM and the 3080 has 10 gigabytes. So almost double the amount, but there's another important distinction here, which is that in this case, in the 3080, Nvidia included the new GDDR6X VRAM, which is faster than the GDDR6 that AMD uses in its cards across the 6000 lineup. How big of a difference that'll make, again, we're not entirely sure, but the numbers don't lie. And like I said, the 3080 would probably slightly outperform the Rage Mode 6800 while the 3080 is overclocked. So don't get me wrong, the 6800 XT is much easier to justify than the 6800, but still I think I would go with the 3080 personally, given a choice between the two. And the reason is just because the 3080 does slightly outperform it, we can guess without Rage Mode and Smart Access Memory and all that stuff, but also sort of more importantly, AMD has had problems with drivers in the past. And being that this is such a giant performance leap for AMD, think 5700 XT to 6900 XT, and that's such a giant performance leap. I think that might just exacerbate the problems, and that driver issues are going to become even more likely. And on top of that, they're also adding ray tracing for the first time, something that Nvidia, at least at first, it made a giant performance impact. And with AMD, the same sort of thing might be likely, and at the same time they're also adding smart access memory, which is yet another point of failure. And I just feel like there's a lot of things that could potentially go wrong, and there could be issues with all the new features and the incredible performance that Radeon 6000 is offering. And for that reason, I would cough up the extra $50 for a 3080 instead of a 6800 XT. It also performs slightly better. And of course, it wouldn't be fair to AMD if I didn't mention that the 3080 from Nvidia also recently has reportedly had some driver problems, but those seem to have since then been fixed. And if Nvidia's having problems with this stuff and they're more experienced in the very high-end GPU market, AMD, I think, is just more likely to have issues like they did in the past with their drivers. And at the same time, another thing that I should probably mention is DLSS, which is something that AMD does not currently have a direct competitor for. So that already gives Nvidia, albeit small, leg up over AMD. For the probably very small amount of you guys who are actually considering purchasing either a 3090 or a 6900 XT, I have good news about the Radeon 6000 launch. And I think that the 6900 XT provides excellent value. I mean, it's neck and neck with the 3090. Even though I think it would be a little bit behind once you disable Rage Mode and Smart Access Memory, assuming you don't have the capabilities for that. But even if it's just a little bit behind, it's $500 less. And sure, it does have 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 instead of 24 gigabytes of GDDR6X. So the 3090 is definitely the better card, but it is $500 less. So I would, in fact, recommend the 6900 XT over the 3090. It definitely makes it more affordable. Although, of course, a lot of the people buying these really high-end GPUs, money is probably not much of an object for you. And if that's the case, then you'd probably buy a 3090. Because if you can afford to spend $1,000 without any compromise, you could probably go ahead and spend $1,500 and get the 3090, which would perform probably slightly better once you disable Rage Mode and Smart Access Memory, and also, which would be, of course, like the other stuff that I've said before, like driver stability and stuff, that would be better. As in addition to, if you're not just gaming, or if you want to do 8K gaming, perhaps it would not hurt to have the 24 gigabytes of GDDR6X VRAM instead of the 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 VRAM. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave a like down below, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.